Tritill, Litill, and the Birds, from the Crimson Fairy Book, edited by Andrew Lang. Once upon a time there lived a princess who was so beautiful and so good that everybody loved her. Her father could hardly bear her out of his sight, and he almost died of grief when, one day, she disappeared, and though the whole kingdom was searched through and through, she could not be found in any corner of it. In despair, the king ordered a proclamation to be made that whoever could bring her back to the palace should have her for his wife. This made the young men start afresh on the search, but they were no more successful than before, and returned sorrowfully to their homes. Now there dwelt, not far from the palace, an old man who had 3 sons. The 2 eldest were allowed by their parents to do just as they liked, but the youngest was always obliged to give way to his brothers. When they were all grown up, the eldest told his father that he was tired of leading such a quiet life, and that he meant to go away and see the world. The old people were very unhappy at the thought that they must part with him, but they said nothing, and began to collect all that he would want for his travels, and were careful to add a pair of new boots. When everything was ready, he bade them farewell and started merrily on his way. For some miles, his road lay through a wood, and when he left it, he suddenly came out on a bare hillside. Here he sat down to rest, and pulling out his wallet, prepared to eat his dinner. He had only eaten a few mouthfuls when an old man, badly dressed, passed by, and seeing the food, asked if the young man could not spare him a little. "Not I, indeed," answered he. "Why, I have scarcely enough for myself. If you want food, you must earn it." And the beggar went on. After the young man had finished his dinner, he rose and walked on for several hours till he reached a second hill, where he threw himself down on the grass and took some bread and milk from his wallet. While he was eating and drinking, there came by an old man, yet more wretched than the first, and begged for a few mouthfuls. But instead of food, he only got hard words and limped sadly away. Towards evening, the young man reached an open space in the wood, and by this time he thought he would like some supper. The birds saw the food and flew round his head in numbers, hoping for some crumbs, but he threw stones at them and frightened them off. Then he began to wonder where he should sleep. Not in the open space he was in, for that was bare and cold, and though he had walked a long way that day and was tired, he dragged himself up and went on seeking for a shelter. At length he saw a deep sort of hole or cave under a great rock, and as it seemed quite empty, he went in and lay down in a corner. About midnight he was awakened by a noise, and peeping out, he beheld a terrible ogress approaching. He implored her not to hurt him, but to let him stay there for the rest of the night, to which she consented on condition that he should spend the next day in doing any task which she might choose to set him. To this the young man willingly agreed, and turned over and went to sleep again. In the morning the ogress bade him sweep the dust out of the cave, and to have it cleaned before her return in the evening, otherwise it would be the worse for him. Then she left the cave. The young man took the spade and began to clean the floor of the cave, but try as he would to move it, the dirt still stuck to its place. He soon gave up the task and sat sulkily in the corner, wondering what punishment the ogress would find for him, and why she had set him to do such an impossible task. He had not long to wait after the ogress came home before he knew what his punishment was to be. She just gave one look at the floor of the cave, then dealt him a blow on the head which cracked his skull, and there was an end of him. Meanwhile, his brother grew tired of staying at home, and let his parents have no rest till they had consented that he also should be given some food and some new boots, and go out to see the world. On his road he also met the 2 beggars, who prayed for a little of his bread and milk. But this young man had never been taught to help other people, and had made it a rule through his life to keep all he had to himself. So he turned a deaf ear and finished his dinner. By and by he too came to a cave, and was bidden by the ogress to clean the floor. But he was no more successful than his brother, and his fate was the same. Anyone would have thought that when the old people had only one son left, that at least they would have been kind to him, even if they did not love him. But for some reason they could hardly bear the sight of him, though he tried much harder to make them comfortable than his brothers had ever done. So when he asked their leave to go out into the world, they gave it at once, and seemed quite glad to be rid of him. They felt it was quite generous of them to provide him with a pair of new boots and some bread and milk for his journey. Beside the pleasure of seeing the world, the youth was very anxious to discover what had become of his brothers, and he determined to trace, as far as he could, the way that they must have gone. He followed the road that led from his father's cottage to the hill where he sat down to rest, saying to himself, "I am sure my brothers must have stopped here, and I will do the same." He was hungry as well as tired, and took out some of the food his parents had given him. He was just going to begin to eat, when the old man appeared and asked if he could not spare him a little. The young man at once broke off some of the bread, begging the old man to sit down beside him and treating him as if he was an old friend. At last the stranger rose and said to him, "If ever you are in trouble, call me, and I will help you. My name is Tritill." Then he vanished, and the young man could not tell where he had gone. However, he felt he had now rested long enough, and that he had better be going his way. At the next hill he met with the second old man, and to him also he gave food and drink. And when this old man had finished, he said, like the first, "If you ever want help in the smallest thing, call to me. My name is Litill." The young man walked on till he reached the open space in the wood where he stopped for dinner. In a moment all the birds in the world seemed flying round his head, and he crumbled some of his bread for them, and watched them as they darted down to pick it up. When they had cleared off every crumb, the largest bird with the gayest plumage said to him, "If you are in trouble and need help, say, 'My birds, come to me,' and we will come." Then they flew away. Towards evening, the young man reached the cave where his brothers had met their deaths, and like them, he thought it would be a good place to sleep in. Looking round, he saw some pieces of the dead men's clothes and of their bones. The sight made him shiver, but he would not move away, and resolved to await the return of the ogress, for such he knew she must be,